So it is officially Wednesday, January 29th. We have been in Trump 2.0 for only 9 days, and yet the pace seems as manic as ever. Will you help us to understand how this first 10 days compares to, say, the first of the Trump 2017 era, and what this will tell us, or what this could tell us for the next 4 years?
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about a lot because, as someone who covered the first Trump administration, some aspects of this feel deeply familiar.
Right.
Some of the personnel have returned. Of course, the president is the same person and has many of the same tendencies. Other things are different. And primarily, that was something that came into focus during the transition, which was much more focused and intentional and organized than the transition at the end of the 2016 campaign
Right.
going into 2017. The other thing that's really different is the opposition. Democrats have taken much longer to pick themselves off the mat and figure out how to move forward. I'm going to be attending at the end of this week the DNC winter meeting where they're trying to pick a new chair. And, you know, ironically, Democrats are in a better position in some ways now. The House majority that the Republicans have is much narrower than in 2017, when people don't necessarily remember this, but Paul Ryan was the speaker at the time, and he could lose up to 27 Republican votes and still pass a bill. Mike Johnson can lose one. So, in a lot of ways, Republicans feel much more dominant. They feel like they have more of a mandate. Trump, of course, won the popular vote this time, although he did not quite get 50%. And you have a party that is much more Trump focused, right?
Right.
It's in 2017. That's another big difference. It was much more Paul Ryan's Republican Party, Mitt Romney's Republican Party. There was much more dissent within the GOP ranks. There's certainly plenty of arguments within and among Republicans right now. And again, with that narrow margin, we're going to see that play out, I think, dramatically over the next few months in Congress. But overall, this is a party that is much more loyal to Trump and to what they believe he represents. So, yeah, less resistance, more Trump loyalty, a
Right.
more focused and organized sense of where exactly Trump wants to take the government. The other big difference, I would say, is Elon Musk. Having the richest man in the world in your corner. Another thing people may not remember is that back in 2017, Elon Musk was still functionally a Democrat. He'd supported Barack Obama. He saw his main mission in life, besides getting to Mars, as solving climate change by inventing electric cars.
It's
And he actually resigned from a Trump advisory council over Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. This time, of course, Elon Musk has an office in the West Wing, has cheerled Trump doing things like withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, and is imposing his own disruptive style on the federal bureaucracy in ways that we are seeing play out with this federal buyout offer in Washington. So,
right.
a
That
lot of
is such
similarities, a lot of differences.
that a lot of this that was a great review of that, Molly. And that's, I think, maybe one of the other questions that a lot of folks, including myself, are wondering, which is how much of the disruption that both Musk and now I would say, like you did, a more organized Trump White House, how much of this is, let's just sort of test the boundaries, see how much we can disrupt, what we can actually get done, and how much of it is just we want to actually. Well, let me rephrase this. Is this disruption for disruption's sake, Molly, or are they really trying to fundamentally alter the way that the federal government and the way that basically the American rule of law, constitutional law, works?
I think it's very much the latter. I don't think this
Mm.
is just chaos for chaos's sake. I don't think they're just, throwing things in the air to see where they land. I think, if you look at uh, the things that Russ Vought has said over the years, the incoming director of the Office of Management and Budget, who was also very involved with the famous Heritage Foundation document Project 2025, uh, there is a very well fleshed out worldview underlying all of this. And I think Elon Musk shares it, and it's part of the animating impulse behind his attempts to impose what he calls greater efficiency on the government. This idea that, what critics call Trump's sort of authoritarian tendencies are really just sort of frustration with the so-called deep state, the way that the federal bureaucracy and the proliferation of executive agencies and regulations and rules have made it impossible to get anything done. So you get elected president, the voters have said, yeah, we want you to do these things you said you were going to do in the campaign, and then you can't actually do any of them, either because there are bureaucrats actively working to thwart you, or because there are just these thickets of rules and regulations that take years and years to wade your way through, or Congress is gridlocked and limited in the things that it's willing to do, and the legal system is going to fight you at every turn with activist judges that are going to block the things you want to do. So I would say there's a really coherent worldview that says you have to actually attack the system if you want to change it. And by the way, voters too are frustrated and fed up with the system of government. Voters too feel like part of the problem with our democracy is it just doesn't deliver for people, because nothing ever happens. And it's this sort of, slow moving battleship that no one, even the most strong-willed president, has the ability to turn around. Right. Now, that's sort of the positive case for it, right? The negative case for it is when you disrupt things, you disrupt people's lives. You disrupt the healthcare and services that they depend on. And in practice, voters tend to freak out about that a little bit. But I would say there is an intentionality to all of this. And they are pushing the boundaries, but they're pushing the boundaries because they want to implement the things that they want to do, even if those things upset the apple cart.
Well, and even if those things perhaps are used against them when they aren't in power. And that's, I think, to me, another interesting question. Going forward, you see Congress actually ceding its power willingly to the executive branch, which is easier when it's your party in charge. I do wonder, will we see when a Democrat gets to be the president of the United States at some point, will this be the new norm? And how will Republicans respond to that?
It's a really good question. I think a lot depends on what happens with all of these legal cases,
Right.
and how the administration responds to them. There is the real possibility for a separation of powers confrontation and even crisis. If, for example, the administration decides to ignore a Supreme Court ruling that it doesn't like. Already we see, the flouting of congressional authority, right? I mean, it says, it's one of the very first things it says in the Constitution is Congress gets to decide how taxpayer
Right.
money is spent. And then there's also a law from the 1970s that says the president doesn't get to just withhold that money when he doesn't think it's a good idea. But this administration believes that 1974 law is unconstitutional, and so they are challenging it, full throttle. On his very first day in office, Trump ignored legislation passed by Congress and unanimously upheld by the Supreme Court in saying that he was not going to get rid of TikTok. So already we have an administration that is really challenging norms and laws and forcing a confrontation with the other branches of government. So when it comes to Congress, I think you have, a Republican Party that is on board with Trump's agenda, even if some of them might mutter under their breath that they think that this is their job. Some in Congress feel that they've sort of brought this on themselves by not doing their jobs, right? You have a Congress that is perpetually gridlocked, dysfunctional, can't can barely even keep the lights on in the federal government. So it's no surprise that a president with what he views as a strong electoral mandate would seize power away from Congress. Now, part of what gets lost in this whole discussion about like executive orders, I think people do have this misimpression that executive orders are something that presidents just started doing because they were fed up with Congress not doing its job. And so, Obama famously saying, "I'm going to use my pen and my
The
phone
phone and the pen. Yeah.
and do the things that Congress isn't doing." But there's a very long history of executive orders in this country. Everything from the Emancipation Proclamation to Japanese internment. So presidents for a long time have used their executive authority to impose wide-ranging policy change on the country. And the whole point of the separation of powers is that it's always a bit of a dance. It's always a bit of a balance. But I think to actually answer your question without answering it, we don't actually know yet where this is all going to land and what kind of precedent is going to be set, because we are still in very early stages.
Absolutely.